All right, this is my good friend Brady Pennington. I'm so excited to sit down with him and basically just hear from his perspective an answer to some questions. And really looking forward to this opportunity. All right, Coach, how long did you coach?
Well, I was blessed to coach for 36 years. I spent time in Van, Texas, and was at Brenham for a couple of years. Went back to Van and got to be the head coach there for 8 years. And then moved to New Caney, where I kind of finished up my career. And that had been the last place in the world that I would have ever thought I'd end up. But it really turned out to be a blessing. And so 36 years of being in the profession.
Why did you choose coaching?
Well, that's a great question. When I was one of those kids that kind of found out what my calling was going to be early, and the reason that happened was I was a part of a youth group called Young Life. We had a big Young Life group. I grew up in Athens, Texas, and was a big part of Young Life, and I think it's really important for any youth, and any parents that get a hold of this or whatever. Super important to get your kids plugged into a youth group, FCA, and Young Life was that for us. I was also involved in FCA there in Athens, but Young Life was a really spiritually growing time for me. And we went and spent a weekend my junior year. It was just late spring. It was actually over in Palestine, Texas, and that's where I live right now. And spent a weekend there, and the whole purpose of the weekend was, where is God leading us? What do we feel like is our purpose, and what lies ahead for us? And that weekend I came away without a doubt knowing I wanted to coach. And so and it just isn't it crazy? I ended up moving to that. I'm actually probably 3 miles from that location where we went and spent that weekend. There's a little lake, down not very far from where I live, and so. But I a lot of prayer that weekend, and I kind of always loved athletics, and played football and track and a little bit of basketball in my younger years in school, and so I just felt a very strong calling that weekend. This is what I'm supposed to do in my life, and so I kind of knew pretty early on, and that's what I pursued, and God really blessed me through these years.
What were some of the things you enjoyed about coaching?
Oh man, a lot of things, about the profession. First of all, just being involved in sports was an awesome thing for me. Also, I love being in the coach's office and being around those, coaches, and just that camaraderie. You work extremely hard as a coaching staff, and you really get close to those guys. You spend more time, with your coaching family than you do with your own family. It's a lot of hours, and it's really important that you get plugged into the right staff. And I was very blessed in that regard, and really worked with and for some great men, and really made an impact on me. Coaching, obviously with the men that I coached with and teachers, and then obviously the kids. It's been so much fun to be around kids and get to mentor kids and influence and impact, and I really wish coaches would really understand how powerful that is. It's a really powerful platform, and I loved every minute of it. That part of it for sure, and. So it's a very rewarding profession in that you're able to really influence and impact a lot of people, but it's also quite a responsibility too, and because you do have that power. And we used to always tell our kids, and when I became a head coach, I told our assistant coaches that somebody's always watching, and there's always you're always influencing and impacting. It doesn't make any difference what role you're in. You're influencing and impacting. And I really think that as a profession for coaching is times 10, because those kids are watching you like a hawk and everything that you do and everything you say. And so I think that's probably what I love the most.
One thing I would recall about you personally, that when a kid, when you could see a kid kind of get bought into kind of what our program was all about, and that's how we do it. Like just doing the right thing because that's how we do it. And to me, I saw you just swell up with pride so many times through the years when you would see a kid say, "Oh, Coach, that's how we do it," And
well, you're exactly right. You pour so much into it, and you're trying to influence and impact. And when you hear those kids repeat those things back to you, when a lot of times as a coach you're thinking, are they listening? Are they getting this? Do not take for a second that they're not. They're listening. And when you're saying the good things and when you're saying the bad, they're listening. And it's a very powerful position, and it comes with a lot of responsibility.
Yeah. Well, what were some things you didn't enjoy about coaching?
I think, probably we may talk about this a little bit later, but, one of the things that comes to mind right off the bat is just the pressure of coaching. In my career, not only did it happen as a head coach, but it also happened as an assistant coach. I had mentioned that I had really worked under some really great men and with some great men. And so I always felt a part. I always felt like, it wasn't, that head coach that's taking responsibility for this. This is we are taking responsibility. So, it's a lot of pressure in coaching and needing to be successful. And so I wish it wasn't that way. I think a great example of that is, everybody putting in all the hours in the summer. And you do it because everybody else is doing it. I used to tell people, I wish we could just let them go be kids for the summer. Yeah. And let's just all go swimming at the pond and fishing and eat ice cream and, be a kid. But, we were always pushing those kids to get them up there during the summer because everybody else was doing the same, and we would fall behind if we didn't. And never liked that, about it. I always thought it was important for kids to be kids. And our kids that are involved in our programs today, in athletic programs, it's year round. It has become that for sure now. And so I'm not sure I really like that. I always deal with irate parents. Didn't like that too much. Later in my career, I kind of enjoyed doing that because my perspective changed. I would go into those meetings as a head coach, not early in my head coaching year, but my latter years. I went into those meetings with parents it was not going to be a pleasant meeting, but I went into it thinking of it as an opportunity and not dreading, I'm fixing to, have to go in here and listen to this irate parent. I began to take it as an opportunity to help them better understand exactly what we were doing. So that kind of changed for me a little bit. It was really uncomfortable. I hated that part of the job. But later in my career, I kind of changed a little bit in just perspective and what I wanted to be about when I went into that parent. And, younger in my career, it was like, this is the way we're going to do it. If you don't like it, you can take your kid and go somewhere else. And obviously that's not a good way to be. But I found when I just listened and really gave them an ear and then explained maybe some things that they didn't realize from our side, that most of the time it washed out pretty good. There were lessons to be learned on both sides. And so that was good. Really struggled with officials. I'm just being honest. I really struggled with officials, and I know that that's a terrible thing to say, but I'm just being honest, And I was that guy on Friday nights that wasn't the most pleasant guy to probably work for, for those officials. I always felt like, and I know they do a great job, but you're only seeing it from one side. And I regret, a lot of that. But, my deal was I always kind of felt like as hard as we as coaches, as hard as I knew our kids worked all week long, and then you go out there and you play on a Friday night, and, sometimes it felt like, they weren't working very hard. It just seemed like that. So didn't like that part of the job. That eased a little bit, later, but I was pretty crazy early on, definitely. I don't know, maybe some of my assistant coaches would say I wasn't. Maybe some of the referees would say the same. But not a lot of things I didn't like about it. For the most part, I enjoyed teaching. When I was teaching the classroom, I loved that. Yeah. I really did. And I just, my favorite part of football was off season. I loved off season. And I know that sounds crazy because the payoff is on game nights, and stuff, but I really enjoyed off season. And I just think you can get a lot of things done, a lot of things taught during that time of year. And I really looked forward to that and enjoyed it.
Yeah. All right. What are some guiding principles that you would recommend as a coach? Things to kind of help guide that coach along his path.
If I could go out and talk to head coaches and just say, for whatever it's worth, this is what I think is important. These are the things. There's 5 things, and I've even got them wrote down right here. So I don't want to leave out anything. I'm getting old. But there's things that I think that need to be taught, and it needs to be part of your culture. And if you're not doing these things, I feel like you're missing the opportunity to really impact and influence kids to move in the right direction. I also think that these 5 things are instrumental on building young men to be successful, and not just successful on the scoreboard, but just being successful in life and doing what I feel like is just the right thing, doing the right thing, And so the first one is you got to teach them to serve, be servant, to have a servant's heart. We talked about that, and all of these things can really be hammered in during off season. Of course we did it year round, but I think having a servant's heart is uncommon because we're selfish. We're selfish people, and I think teaching kids to have a servant's heart is really uncommon. But I think you look up and it really can serve your kids and your community. I always wanted to, as a head coach, I wanted our program as a football program, or even across the board as our head basketball coaches, our head track coaches. These are all things that I try to instill that they teach to their kids as well. I wanted to go in and impact our whole school. I wanted what we were doing in our athletic program to permeate into the building. And I saw it happen. It just did. And it was verified to me by our principals, that we were fortunate enough to work with, that we were making a difference not only out there in the field house, but we were also that was being transformed into the school building. Mm-hmm. And now you're working. So when you teach a kid to have a servant's heart, it's when those kids go out and pick up trash on their own, But you've got to show them that first. So one of the very first things that I was taught as a young coach was we were going to leave the dugout, the dressing room. We were going to leave them better than when we got there. And so, it always starts out, so how do you teach kids that? And that's just having a servant's heart. You didn't have to do that. They got people that will come in there and do that. But I just wanted to be different. I wanted to teach that, have that lesson being taught. And so it starts out with, me and a couple of coaches in there cleaning up after the games. And then you look up and all of a sudden you got kids in there with you. And then you look up and the whole team is in there picking up after themselves. And so that's how you do it. You just kind of do it by example first, and then you talk about it. And then you brag on it to those kids, Hey, I saw you. Or a teacher sends an email. I can remember this vividly. There at New Canaan, we were at New Canaan, had a teacher send me an email just off the cuff. Hey, I watched, 500 kids walk by, this trash that was on the floor. 2 of your football players picked it up. And boy, you don't think that we didn't do a hoo-ah and next time we met as a group, I brought that up and bragged and loved on them kids. And then those other kids see that and they want that recognition too. So I think it's really important. I think we all need to have a servant's heart. Be willing to help wherever we're needed and look for things that need to be done too. I think that's having a servant's heart. So we need to do that. I think a big one, and I think it's huge for our society, it was definitely big for us in our athletic program, and that is to submit to authority figures in their life. And, just teach them to be submissive. And, sometimes you look at that word submissive and you think about, well, that's weakness or whatever. No, that's respect, just being respectful. And so I demanded that, of our kids. So how do you do that? Well, one of the things, I didn't allow our kids to make up any excuses. When a coach spoke to them and told them to do something, I didn't want to hear any excuse of why they couldn't do it. I just wanted them to do it. And I wanted them to do it right then. And our kids would come in sometimes and maybe they had a problem in a classroom. And remember, I wanted our athletic programs to go into the buildings. I wanted to transcend not only out there what we were doing, but I wanted to go into the main building, and I wanted them to be an example for the whole school. So what ended up, happening for us is a kid would come down and maybe I got a note from a teacher. And I always encouraged our teachers to let me know if so-and-so, was being disrespectful. I want to know. I want to know what they said, and if they were, being submissive to your authority or they weren't. Because we talked about it, we talked about the need to do that. And so it always came back when a kid has an argument, they may have a legitimate argument because, there's knucklehead teachers, there's knucklehead coaches, there's knucklehead principals, sometimes we get it wrong as an authority figure. But I don't care. That's your authority figure. And so I always would tell them, they would want to argue a little bit about that teacher said this and they were wrong. They got on to me and this and people have. And I'm like, no, I don't want to hear that. The bottom line is they asked you to do something and the answer is yes, sir. Yes, ma'am. That's it. And then if you feel like you were falsely accused, whatever, then you have those conversations after class. You go, hey, can I talk to you about that? And so we try to go that way, with them. So we offer no excuses. I don't want to hear your excuse. And then you got to be consistent with that. And being consistent was every time a teacher I got a note, I don't care who was right or wrong. I wanted those kids to understand it's not about you being right. It's about you being submissive to that authority figure. And they always had a punishment to do for me. If they got in trouble, I don't care what it was about. You were going to do it. It wasn't a massive amount of running or whatever, but it was something. And they were going to do it. And they were going to have joy in the heart about it. We were going to do that. And then, you look up after you do that, and you're consistent, and everybody in that group knows you're going to be consistent about it. Then you look up and they start buying into, hey, we got to submit to authority figures. The coach says that, and we got to do that. And so that's a biggie. That's huge. And I think that'll help them way down. When they get pulled over by a policeman or whatever happens in their life, they better understand authority figures in their life and how to deal with those authority figures. I think we got to be great encouragers. You better teach your kids how to encourage one another. So how does that transcend? Well, how many times is somebody's going to fumble the ball? Somebody's going to drop a ball. Somebody's going to miss a tackle. Somebody's going to miss a basket. You're going to have people messing up. And so I think it's huge for others in the group to make sure they're going over to that guy and raising them up, lifting them up, and encouraging them, and tell them it's going to be okay. Hey, we'll get the next one. Don't worry about it. And I think that's got to become part of your culture. And so, for us, it was awesome to do it, in the weight room. And I told them, that was a must for us. You're not going to sit there with your mouth shut in the weight room. We're going to be great encouragers. We're going to have our hip and our hop and bip and bop, and we're going to move around that weight room, and we're going to be talking to each other. Hey, you can do it. Let's go. Come on. We got this. Come on. Yeah, one more. And, and when they start doing that, and it becomes a habit to them, and then you look up and it's just happening all over your program. And now you got it. And I think that's, again, it's just doing it over and over and over, and making sure you're talking about it, and then those kids, they start buying into that, and then, we always, one of the things, exercises that we try to implement to make sure we were making them encourage one another is after a workout, I may pick one kid out and make everybody in the room, or not everybody, but I would ask for, hey, give me something positive about this kid. What did you see this kid do today that really impacted you? I want you to share it, and they would just be raising their hand. They couldn't wait to talk about that, what that kid did, or how maybe he encouraged you. Hey, that kid encouraged me today. I was sinking, I was going down. That guy came and lifted me up. And so how do you think that makes that kid feel that's getting encouraged, that's sitting there? So you got one kid that's sitting in the middle of the room, and you got all these other kids that are raising their hand up, wanting to say something positive about that kid. That's being a great encouragement.
Yeah, that's right.
And it's powerful, and it's impactful. And so we did, we always did that. Got to be unselfish, and that's got to be taught. Got to be unselfish. And it's something that you got to talk about. You've got to praise it when kids are being unselfish. And, that's a deal where you got to have stories to tell them. And, about, you need this kid to play guard, but he thinks he's a fullback. But, man, you need to have him at a guard. Well, if you're not doing this, the whole time in your program, if it's not part of your culture, then you're probably not going to get much buy-in from that kid that wants to be a fullback. And you're needing him to be a guard. Whereas if a kid is bought into the unselfish trait, then all you have to do, if you're saying that all the time in your program and it's something you're preaching, then all you got to do is remind him maybe one time, I really need you to be unselfish. Our team needs you to do that. I've got a plethora of stories about that very thing, where kids had to do it for the team. It's not what they wanted to do. But all of those situations, for the most part, I wouldn't say 100%, but a big percent, those kids always enjoyed whatever that role was that you needed to do, but they didn't want to do it. But if you're not talking about this on a daily basis, if you're not watching for it in your kids and then bringing it up and giving them, praise for being unselfish, you're going to have a real hard road. I think that's probably one of the hardest things to teach, because we're born into this world. We're old nasty sinners, and being selfish. Nobody has to teach us to be selfish. We're all there. Me included. So, but I think it's something that you can definitely work on, and I think you have to work on it if you're going to be successful as a unit and as a team.
Awesome.
And then I think those things, if you do, so that's 4 things: to serve, to submit, to encourage, and to be unselfish. And then, everybody's got their other stuff that you do, and you got your pillars or whatever your, things that you like to talk about in your program. But to me, those are things that have to be implemented into your program for you to establish the right kind of culture. One of the things for us that was really important for us is we weren't going to cuss. My coaches weren't going to cuss. We expected our kids not to cuss. And so if a kid did cuss, to me, they're being selfish. Because they very well could get a penalty for that, And so, all those things, as you go through your journey with that particular team, that particular group of kids, when you're implementing this stuff and you're bringing attention to it and you're doing it on a daily basis, I think they like it. When it's all said and done, it's washed out. They're proud that they're different and they're doing those things. And Tony Dungy's book, Being Uncommon. We always talked about that. Hey, be uncommon. I don't want you to be like all these other yahoos that we're playing against. Sometimes. And I think it really makes a difference. And then you go back to what I enjoy about coaching. You brought it up. When you do this and you're implementing it, and you have to have buy-in from your coaches. Your coaching staff has to be bought into these principles. They got to walk it and live it and breathe it. And because your kids are seeing them more than they do their parents, stuff. We've already talked about that. But when that starts happening, and then you hear those kids repeating that to each other, they start monitoring one another. Now you instead of the coaches doing it, they're doing it. Yeah. Now you got something special. Yeah, probably going to have some really good things happen to your team when these things are being implemented and the kids start taking over and holding each other accountable for them. So I call that being a transformational coach. You're really transforming that kid and building him into being a productive young man or young lady. That was long. I'm sorry.
That was awesome.
A good question.
Coach, you coached for a long time, so did I. Are there things that stand out to you? I know a lot of things have changed, but in all those, are there things that stand out to you that have changed from the beginning of your career to the end of your career? Is there anything that just jumps out at you about, man, that's really changed?
Well, you're hearing these things that I just talked about. You're hearing more and more coaches. It's so good to see. They're starting to be more aware, and they're implementing these things into their programs. There's a lot of character education going on. At Mackey Speaks, and coaching to change lives, and so those are really good things to see. And I think a lot of coaches talked about it, but I'm not sure they spent the time that you have to spend to implement those character programs and really mean it. Like I say, you can't just talk it. You gotta walk it. And you as a head coach have to surround yourself with men that want to do the same. And that all comes back from the head coach. I think if that's what the head coach wants to be about, you hold your coaches to that standard. Those coaches are going to do nothing but benefit from going through something that they're holding kids accountable for these things, because then they're also holding themselves accountable for it. We all need to do that. Probably the biggest change for me, some people, and I have felt both ways. I have felt like, man, kids are different today, but then I've also felt like they're not any different than when I was growing up. The things that are different is technology. The silly phones. That's different. They are glued to those phones, and so you got to have whatever your policies are about that. But as a coach, I do think, whether you want to or not, I do think you better jump on the technology board, and you better be Twitter, and you better be putting out things to let everybody know the positive things that are going on in your program, because everybody else is doing it, And I think it's important to do that. I don't like doing that. I don't like messing with that, but I think it's necessary. And I think that you have to. I think it's important that you do that. It's such a lifeline for parents and for kids alike. And it's what they do. It's what they want to look at. And so that's really different. As far as holding kids to a standard and working kids hard and everything, we didn't change. We didn't change much, And I bring up some words, and my coaching staff will understand this. We did the 3-2-1s, and we did the double rounds, and just worked them hard. And you do that, and then they don't know any different. They just think that's the way it's supposed to be done. And that hadn't changed. We never had any problems with what our expectations were, work ethic wise, around kids. I don't think that's changed once you've established what that is. So, something about that.
All right, Coach. How important is winning, and how would you define success?
Oh man. Well, I got a story. I could tell you about that. I'll try to make it quick and simple as I can. I felt like I wasted in my younger days of coaching. It was all about winning, and I still loved kids, and I was still pouring into kids. Doing FCA, I felt like I was, about character, but I'm talking about just absolutely sacrificing my family time and whatnot. And what I mean by that is, if we lost on a Friday night, then I was in such a bad mood for a week until we got back on the field the next Friday night. So ridiculous, and just felt the pressure. We got to win, and you're not going to win them all. And for you to sit around and sulk for a week, I was that guy. And maybe didn't interact with my kids and stuff. I wasted a lot of time. So if I was a guy sitting and talking to new guys that are getting in it, I'd say walk very carefully about thinking that winning is everything, because you're not going to win all the time. And so you have to, I think you have to reestablish what success is. And that's kind of what you asked me. What is success? I think success is working as hard as you can, implementing these things in your program that we've talked about already, doing your due diligence in teaching these young men to be young men and to be productive. And sometimes that doesn't always equal on the scoreboard. But I think that we have to be happy with the effort that we're putting into things and what we're teaching kids. It's not just winning. It's how are you impacting and influencing kids? And, we've all been in that boat where we're not going to win. This Friday night, we don't have a chance. But that's not what matters. What matters is for you to prepare to win and for you to pour into those kids and get them ready to go win. And then you let the scoreboard take care of itself. You've done your due diligence of pouring into the kids and getting them ready, and the kids respond to that. When you've worked as hard as you can work and you've put everything you can into it, and you're developing them as young men, then after a loss, the very first man I worked for was Mal Fowler in Van, and we didn't lose a whole lot while he was there. But when we lost the game, and I did this for the rest of my career, was before those kids got off that bus that night after that loss, he'd always talk to them. He always ended with, "Sun's going to come up tomorrow. Sun's going to be here tomorrow. We're going to go back to work, and it's going to be okay." And I stole that, and I've said it, and I think a lot of my coaches say it to this day. When they're talking to their kids, and it's so true. Yeah. Sun's going to come up. It's going to be all right. Just do everything you can. Pour yourself into it. And then you have to be happy with the effort that you put into that. And I think that's the most important thing. I really do. Yeah. Winning's fun. Obviously it's a lot more fun. But it's not everything. Yeah. And I think it's important that people that maybe are in situations where maybe they're just not going to win right now. And maybe that's down the road. And that happened to us at New Caney.
That's a good point.
We weren't going to win early. But our kids didn't know that. And we worked them just as hard. And I always told them, it's going to happen. And when it does, all of you guys that have paved the way for the guys that they're going to stand on your shoulders, you're going to be a part of that. Just know that, and that's what happened. We ended up being pretty successful there after not being successful for, 3 or 4 years. And so,
is built on that attitude and that work ethic that even though the scoreboard wasn't showing it, those kids knew what they were doing was the right thing, and they were working like winners. And sure enough, that culture developed into when we finally were able to compete athletically.
Yes.
We overachieved. Sorry, I know this is your interview, but I get excited when you talk about it.
No, this is exactly right. And you were so much a part of that. And what did it, because of that attitude, because of what we tried to instill in our kids, that winning wasn't everything.
Right.
And I really didn't talk about winning and losing. We really didn't talk about we're going to win a district championship. Now I would say that from time to time during the off season, I might say, hey, let's get ready to win a district championship.
Yeah.
Because I wanted that kind, I wanted them thinking that that's possible. But I always, once the season got started, we really didn't worry about that. We just worried about getting ready to play that week.
Yeah.
And the work that was going to be put in for that week. Yeah. And then what ended up happening is it sure enabled our kids to bounce back on Monday after that loss on Friday.
That's right.
Because our culture and our attitude was such that that loss, it hurt, but we were able to recuperate from it quickly because now it was time to go back to work, right? We had a new week. It was a new beginning. The sun came up. And so I think all those things are things that you can instill in your kids and in your program, and they are tremendously powerful.
Awesome. Okay, last question. How important is faith in this profession?
Yeah. Well, I got into this profession because of my faith, if you remember.
Yeah.
And, it's so hard. Coaching really has its struggles because of the ups and downs. And, I've lost kids before. I've had kids pass away and car wrecks and just life happening, with your programs and what the kids are going through. And it might be, we lost a really close game and knocked us out of the playoffs. Been right there and 4-way tie, and we didn't get in. I think my faith has, number one, allowed me to prioritize what was really important, and especially as I matured as a coach and I got past gotta win, and I so regret all that because of how it affected my family, and I wasn't right. I wasn't thinking right there, then. And having my faith allowed me to prioritize what was really important. God really instilled that in my heart. And through my 36 years of coaching, I was pretty vocal and open with my faith around the kids. And I always preface everything, I share scripture and things with them. But I always, try to tell them, I'm not trying to baptize you, but let me tell you some truth. Let me give you some great advice, and then I might read a scripture that just kind of scratching where it itched, where we were at that time, where I could share that with them. And maybe something was going on, maybe just whatever God put on my heart. I was pretty vocal, sharing that with the kids. And I guess the biggest thing about, being a Christian and coaching profession is it really does give you a sense of purpose. Going through the motions and doing things that just because the world says you got to win, and we buy into that sometimes, and that's just really hard to get through. When you're a Christian and you have that faith, number one, it gives you hope. In our last job at New Caney, we had some really rough years there at first, and I spent a lot of lunch times. There was a park about 3 miles from the school. It was Bull Shoals Park, and you'll remember that park. And I went and wept, cried, God, why am I here? What am I doing? What am I doing wrong? Because it wasn't about it wasn't about touchdowns. We were trying to figure out how to pick up a first down. and it was rough. It was really tough. But through that time, God really made it very clear to me what was important. What was really important at that time was pouring into kids and pouring these things to serve, to submit, to encourage, to be unselfish. Really making that the priority. And when we really implemented that and started pouring that into our kids, we spent a lot of time, doing it. I was happier, my coaches were happier, and our kids really gained a sense of purpose. So for me, that faith-based priority really gave me a sense of purpose and direction, and it wasn't always about getting that W. And that gave me hope, and it gave me a sense of rest and peace.
Yeah.
It's really a big deal.
Awesome. Well, Coach, thank you for this interview. I feel blessed that you spent this time with me, and I think I hope that it'll impact some coaches, especially younger coaches that are getting in this profession. And you guys have heard it. This is a coach's perspective. Coach Brady Pennington.